The first scream cut through the night like broken glass. The sound didn't belong in a place like this, not among the soft jazz, the clinking of wine glasses, and the murmur of wealth. Heads turned, chairs scraped, and gasps filled the air. Outside, under the glow of the golden garden lights, a small boy flailed in the water, his tiny arms slapping desperately at the rippling surface. His father, millionaire Charles Whitmore, froze for a heartbeat, disbelief painting his face. The guests stared, no one daring to move, as if money itself had tied their feet to the marble floor. Then came the splash. Alicia didn't think. She dropped the tray from her hands, it crashed, scattering glass and silver across the floor, and ran toward the fountain. Her shoes flew off mid-stride. The cold night air bit at her skin, but she didn't care. With one leap, she hit the water. The shock of it stole her breath, but she reached for the child, his small form sinking fast beneath the surface. Her arms wrapped around him, her fingers clawing upward through the heavy water, until at last they broke through to air. The crowd gasped as she lifted Evan, sputtering and coughing, into her arms. His face was pale, his curls plastered to his forehead, his chest heaving with ragged cries. Alicia pulled him close, whispering softly, "It's okay, sweetheart. I got you. You're safe now." She climbed out of the fountain, soaked to the bone, trembling in the cool wind. Water streamed down her uniform, dripping onto the stone path. Evan's small hands clung to her neck like a lifeline. But before she could even set him down gently, Charles stormed forward, his face flushed with panic and anger. "Give him to me," he barked, snatching the boy from her arms. "Someone get a towel, now. What kind of place lets this happen?" The words hit Alicia harder than the cold water ever could. She blinked, stunned, watching as he turned his back to her. "No, thank you." "No, are you okay?" Nothing. She had just saved his son's life, and he couldn't even look at her. Around them, the guests whispered. Some pulled out their phones, recording the scene. Others simply stared, caught between awe and discomfort. The restaurant manager rushed over, forcing a smile that didn't reach his eyes. "Alicia," he hissed quietly, "go change. You're dripping everywhere." She looked down. Water pooled around her shoes, tiny streams trailing away like evidence of something that shouldn't be forgotten. Her fingers still shook, her heart pounding in her chest. She wanted to cry, but she swallowed it down. "Yes, sir," she whispered. As she walked back toward the kitchen, she could feel the eyes following her, a mix of pity and judgment. A wealthy woman at the nearest table muttered, "Well, at least she did something useful tonight." Another laughed softly. Alicia didn't respond. She kept her head high, even as her wet hair clung to her cheeks. Inside the staff corridor, the air was warm and heavy with the smell of food. The noise from the dining room felt miles away now. Alicia leaned against the wall for a moment, closing her eyes. Her body ached, but what hurt most wasn't the chill, it was the silence that followed her act of courage. She thought of her mother's voice, years ago, reminding her, "You can't expect gratitude from everyone, baby. Sometimes, doing the right thing means walking away unnoticed." Alicia smiled faintly through her tears. Maybe her mother was right. But still, a small part of her heart longed for acknowledgement, not fame, not praise, just a simple, human thank you. Out in the garden, Charles wrapped his son in a blanket. Evan's small voice broke the silence. "Daddy," he said softly, "the lady saved me." Charles didn't answer. He was already on his phone, scolding the restaurant manager, demanding to know how such a thing could happen in an establishment of his standards. To him, it was about reputation, not gratitude. "We're never coming back here," he muttered, holding his son tighter. Inside, Alicia changed into dry clothes. The other waiters offered her shy smiles and quiet praise. "You were brave," one said. "I wouldn't have had the guts to jump in." Alicia shook her head. Anyone would have done it. But deep down, she wasn't sure that was true. She remembered the frozen faces, the expensive suits and dresses, all staring, but none moving. When her shift ended, she stepped outside into the cool night air. The fountain sparkled again, calm and beautiful, as if nothing had happened. The laughter of the wealthy had returned inside. Life had moved on. She walked past the parking lot, where luxury cars gleamed under the soft lights. Charles's black sedan pulled away just as she passed the gate. For a moment, their eyes met through the tinted glass. She couldn't read his expression. Maybe it was anger, maybe embarrassment. But then the car turned the corner and disappeared. Alicia stood there, arms folded against the cold, and let out a long breath. She didn't realize that one of the guests, a young man sitting by the window earlier, had been filming when she jumped into the fountain. The video had caught every detail: the splash, the rescue, the crowd's silence, and Charles's indifference. The camera didn't blink. It saw what people refused to see: a woman of courage being treated as invisible. That night, as Alicia walked home under the dim streetlights, she replayed the moment in her head, the fear in the boy's eyes, the way his small arms had clung to her. That was what mattered, she told herself. Not the millionaire, not the whispers, not the humiliation. She had done something good. Something real. But as she reached her tiny apartment and sat down on her worn sofa, the silence returned. Her phone buzzed with messages from co-workers. "You okay? You were amazing tonight." She smiled faintly at the words, then put the phone down. Outside, the city was quiet. Somewhere, a siren wailed in the distance. She thought about how people like Charles never looked at people like her. How they walked through the world expecting service, not humanity. And she wondered, what would happen if they were ever forced to see? The answer was waiting, in the memory card of a stranger's phone, ready to rewrite everything she believed about justice, dignity, and truth. For now, the night settled around her like a blanket. Alicia closed her eyes, unaware that her act of selfless courage would soon be seen by millions. And when the world watched the footage, it wouldn't be the millionaire they remembered. It would be her, the black waitress who risked her life, was ignored, and yet walked away with grace. Because sometimes, the smallest act of kindness shines brightest in the darkest silence. And the world has no idea what it just witnessed. The camera did. And soon, everyone else would too. The video was spreading faster than anyone could imagine. But inside the restaurant, Alicia didn't know that yet. She came to work the next morning like nothing had happened. Her hair was tied neatly, her uniform crisp and clean. The only sign of the night before was a faint red mark on her wrist, the same wrist that had pulled a child from drowning. She carried trays, smiled at guests, and pretended she didn't hear the whispers. "That's her," one customer murmured. "The waitress who saved that little boy." Another replied, "Did the millionaire ever thank her?" The air was thick with gossip and quiet awe. But behind the curiosity, there was something colder, the kind of tone people used when they couldn't decide whether to admire her or pity her. Alicia brushed it off. She wasn't looking for attention. She'd done what any decent human would have done. But every time she passed the garden fountain, her stomach tightened. The memory of that night, the splash, the silence, the humiliation, replayed over and over. Across town, Charles Whitmore was giving an interview. Cameras flashed as he stood in front of a new development project, talking about his company's commitment to community. He wore the same confident smile he always did. But when a reporter asked, "Mr. Whitmore, we heard your son had a close call last night. Everything okay?" He chuckled and replied, "Oh yes, just a little scare. The staff handled it." That was it. Not a mention of Alicia. Not a word of gratitude. Just another sound bite for a man who thought reputation meant everything. At home that evening, his young son Evan sat quietly at the dinner table, pushing his food around. "Daddy," he said, "why didn't you say thank you to the lady who helped me?" Charles looked up from his phone. "Because, son," he said curtly, "she's paid to help people. That's her job." But even as he said it, something in his son's eyes made him uncomfortable. Innocence had a way of seeing what pride refused to. Back at the restaurant, Alicia sat with her friend Maya during their break. Maya leaned forward, her eyes soft. "Girl, you jumped into that fountain like a hero. And he didn't even look at you." Alicia sighed. "He was scared. I don't blame him." "You don't blame him?" Maya said, shaking her head. "You saved his kid's life. And he acted like you were invisible. That's not fear, Alicia. That's arrogance." Alicia looked down at her coffee, stirring it slowly. "Maybe. But my mama used to say, you don't need to be seen to be good. God saw what I did. That's enough." She smiled faintly, but it didn't reach her eyes. Later that night, a soft chime echoed through the restaurant, a new notification on the manager's phone. He frowned, tapped the screen, and froze. "Oh my God," he whispered. On social media, someone had posted footage from the night of the accident. The entire rescue. Alicia's dive, her struggle, her trembling hands, and Charles's cold indifference. Within minutes, the clip was being shared across platforms. Comments flooded in, "She's a hero. Unbelievable how he treated her. Money can't buy class. By the time Alicia got home, her phone was buzzing non-stop. Dozens of missed calls, messages, notifications. Her co-workers were sending links. "Alicia, you're on the news," one text read. Her hands shook as she clicked the video. There she was, frozen mid-frame, her soaked uniform clinging to her skin, her face full of fear and determination. And then, the moment everyone talked about, Charles snatching his son away, barking orders, not even looking at her. The comment section was a storm. Thousands of strangers defending her, praising her courage, shaming him. But Alicia didn't smile. She didn't want fame. She didn't want to be a headline. She just wanted peace. The next morning, the restaurant was chaos. Reporters hovered outside, hoping to speak to the waitress from the viral video. The manager was nervous. "Alicia," he said, "you might want to stay in the back for a few days. This kind of attention can be tricky." She looked at him calmly. "Tricky for who?" He hesitated. "For our image." Alicia almost laughed. The irony was sharp. The same people who had ignored her were now scared of being seen with her. Meanwhile, Charles was furious. His assistant burst into his office, tablet in hand. "Sir, you need to see this." He clicked the video. For a long moment, he said nothing. The sound of splashing water filled the room. Then his own voice, cold, commanding, echoed back at him. "Someone get him a towel." He watched himself turn away. Watched her, dripping wet and shaking, standing alone. He felt the judgment in every word of the online comments. He slammed the tablet shut. "Get that video taken down," he snapped. "Sir, it's everywhere," his assistant said softly. "It's trending in 15 countries." Charles rubbed his temples. "Then get me a statement. Something to make this go away." But it wouldn't go away. It grew. By evening, major networks were playing the footage. Hashtags spread across social media. People were calling for an apology, calling him heartless, out of touch, cold. At home, his son sat on the couch watching the same clip. When Charles walked in, Evan looked up and said, "That's her, Daddy. The lady who saved me." Charles hesitated, the weight of his son's innocent gaze piercing deeper than any online criticism. He forced a smile. "Yes, son. She was very brave." "Are you going to say thank you now?" the boy asked. Charles didn't answer. He walked to his study, closing the door behind him. Back at her apartment, Alicia scrolled through messages. Some were kind, some cruel. Strangers called her hero. Others accused her of chasing attention. She turned off her phone and stared out the window at the flickering streetlights. Her mother's old Bible sat on the table, open to a verse she'd read 1,000 times. "Do not be weary in doing good, for at the proper time you will reap a harvest if you do not give up." Alicia whispered to herself, maybe this is that time. But she didn't know that the story wasn't done, not even close. Because the same video that exposed Charles's pride was about to drag him somewhere he'd never been before, face to face with humility. And when that moment came, the whole world would be watching. The morning light crept through the blinds of Charles Whitmore's penthouse, painting the marble floors gold. But there was nothing golden about the look on his face. His phone buzzed non-stop. Emails, notifications, headlines, all repeating the same thing. Millionaire ignores waitress who saved his son. It was everywhere. On the news. On blogs. On every social platform. The story had gone global. He sat in silence, staring at the muted television. His own image filled the screen, a freeze frame of him turning away from Alicia, his face cold, his hand clutching his son. The anchor's voice cut through his thoughts. Viewers across the world are outraged after footage showed millionaire investor Charles Whitmore refusing to thank a waitress who risked her life to save his drowning son. Many are calling this a lesson in humanity. Charles slammed the remote down, his jaw tight. "This is ridiculous," he muttered. "People don't understand context." His assistant, David, stood nervously nearby. "Sir, the public doesn't care about context," he said carefully. "They care about what they saw. And what they saw, it doesn't look good." Charles's pride bristled. "You think I'm going to apologize to a waitress because people on the internet are angry?" David didn't answer. Silence filled the room. Meanwhile, across town, Alicia sat on her worn couch, her laptop open. The video played again, but she couldn't bring herself to finish it. She turned away, her stomach tightening. The world now knew her face, her name. Some called her hero, others called her lucky. But she didn't feel like either. All she felt was exposed. A message notification popped up. It was from the restaurant manager. Please come in early today. The media wants an interview. We could use the good publicity. Alicia sighed. She wasn't sure she wanted any of this. Fame wasn't her language, peace was. But she couldn't hide forever. When she arrived at work, cameras lined the street. Reporters called out her name. Alicia! How does it feel to be called a hero? Did the millionaire ever apologize? Do you plan to sue him? She pushed through politely, offering a small smile but no words. Inside, the staff clapped quietly. You're famous now, Maya said with a grin. But Alicia only shook her head. I didn't do this for fame. I just wanted the boy to be safe. By noon, the story had reached Charles' boardroom. His investors sat around the long glass table, their expressions heavy. One of them, an older woman named Evelyn, broke the silence. Charles, this story isn't going away. People see you as a man without empathy. That's not just bad press, that's personal damage. Charles rubbed his forehead. So what do you suggest? Do the right thing, Evelyn said simply. Meet her. Apologize. Let people see that you're human. The word human stung more than he wanted to admit. He'd built a life on being powerful, respected, untouchable. But for the first time, he realized power couldn't buy respect, not the kind that mattered. Later that evening, Charles sat in his car outside the restaurant, his son in the back seat. Evan was holding a tablet, watching the viral video again. That's her, he said softly. She's the lady who saved me. Charles looked at his reflection in the car window. Yes, son. I know. Are you mad at her? Evan asked. Charles frowned. No. Why would I be mad? Because you looked mad in the video. The words hit harder than any headline. For the first time, Charles didn't have an answer. He stepped out of the car, his footsteps slow, deliberate. As he pushed open the restaurant door, the room fell silent. Conversations paused. Heads turned. Everyone recognized him, the man from the video. Alicia stood near the counter, her back turned as she refilled a customer's glass. When she looked up and saw him, her body froze. The memory of that night came rushing back, the water, the fear, his voice, his dismissal. Charles walked up to her. His face was pale, his voice uncertain. Alicia, he said softly, we need to talk. The room grew quieter. Even the music seemed to fade. She wiped her hands on her apron, meeting his eyes calmly. Talk about what, sir? He hesitated. About what happened? The video. Everything. Alicia didn't flinch. There's nothing to talk about. You don't owe me anything. Her tone was kind, but her words carried a quiet strength that shook him. I owe you more than you think, he said. I watched the video. I saw what I did, or didn't do. He paused, his voice cracking slightly. I was wrong. The restaurant seemed to hold its breath. Alicia blinked, unsure what to say. You don't need to apologize, she said after a moment. I didn't save your son for your gratitude. I did it because he needed help. Charles nodded slowly. I know. But still. I was blind. My son saw more that night than I did. He looked down, ashamed. I teach him about success. About power. But he's the one teaching me about kindness. Alicia studied him for a long moment. There was no bitterness in her eyes, only quiet exhaustion. Maybe that's what this was for, she said softly. To remind you that some things are worth more than pride. Charles's throat tightened. You're right. He turned to his son. Evan, this is Alicia. The woman who saved you. Evan's face lit up. He ran to her and threw his small arms around her waist. Thank you, he whispered. You're my hero. Alicia's eyes filled with tears. She knelt down, hugging him back. You're welcome, sweetheart. You be good, okay? Charles watched them, emotion swelling in his chest, something he hadn't felt in years. Reporters outside caught wind of what was happening. Cameras flashed through the glass windows. But for once, Charles didn't care about appearances. This moment wasn't for the world. It was for him, and for her. When Alicia stood, he looked at her with new respect. If you'll let me, he said, I'd like to do something in your honor. Not for the cameras, for real. She smiled faintly. Then start by treating people like they matter. That's more than enough. Charles nodded slowly. For the first time in a long time, he felt small, but in the best possible way. As he left the restaurant, reporters swarmed him with questions. Mr. Whitmore, is it true you apologized? Are you launching a charity for her? He said only one thing, no. I'm launching a reminder that humanity is worth more than money. That night, he sat beside his son, watching the sunset over the city skyline. The same skyline that once symbolized his empire now reminded him of something else, how easily pride can build walls around the heart. In the distance, Alicia walked home beneath the fading light, her reflection shimmering in every shop window. She didn't know that Charles had already begun planning something that would change both their lives, something the world would soon see not as a scandal, but as a second chance. Because sometimes the camera doesn't just expose shame, it reveals the moment a person finally opens their eyes. The next morning, the world was no longer the same for Charles Whitmore. When he walked into his glass-walled office, his assistant looked uneasy. The usual confidence in her voice was gone when she said, "Sir, you need to see this." She turned her laptop toward him, and there it was, the footage. Alicia's soaked dress clinging to her frame, her trembling hands lifting his unconscious child from the water, her voice whispering, "You're okay, baby. Breathe for me." Then, Charles. Grabbing his son without a glance at her, his face hard, his words cold. The internet had exploded overnight. Millionaire ignores black waitress who saved his child. Comments flooded in, disgraceful. That woman is a hero. Money can't buy humanity. For the first time in years, Charles felt something heavy in his chest, shame. He couldn't hide behind his suits or his empire anymore. His reputation had always been built on image, on charm, on power. But now, that image was cracked wide open. And in that reflection, he didn't see a father. He saw a man who had lost his soul somewhere along the way. He cancelled every meeting that day. The house felt too large when he got home, the silence too sharp. Evan sat on the couch, playing with toy cars. "Dad," he said softly, "why are people mad at you?" Charles froze. "Because," he said slowly, "I forgot to say thank you." The boy nodded, not fully understanding, but sensing the weight in his father's voice. Later that evening, Charles drove back to the restaurant. The lights were dim, the air heavy with the scent of Polish and lemon. Alicia was working her shift, pretending nothing had changed, though whispers followed her wherever she went. When she saw him standing by the doorway, her hand tightened on the tray. "Mr. Whitmore," she said quietly, unsure. He walked toward her, not as a man of wealth, but as someone stripped of pride. His voice trembled. "I came to apologize. I was wrong." The room fell silent. Every pair of eyes turned toward them. Alicia blinked, taken aback, her lips parting but no words forming. "You saved my son's life," Charles continued, "and I treated you like you were invisible. That was unforgivable." For a long moment, she didn't speak. The air seemed to thicken with all the years of stories like hers, the ignored, the unseen, the ones who did everything right and still went unnoticed. Finally, she said softly, "I didn't do it for thanks, sir. I did it because he's a child. Because that's what we're supposed to do." Charles nodded, eyes wet. "I know. But you deserve the world's respect, not silence." He reached into his jacket and pulled out an envelope. "I don't want this to feel like charity," he said, "but I want to fund your nursing school tuition. I saw your interview. You said you wanted to help people. Let me do this right, this time." Alicia hesitated, eyes darting to the envelope, then to his face. "Money can't fix everything," she said quietly. He smiled sadly. "No," he agreed. "But maybe sincerity can start something new." By the next week, Charles had publicly acknowledged Alicia's act. He went on national television, not to rebuild his image, but to tell the truth. "That night," he said, "a waitress taught me more about humanity than I'd learned in 40 years of business." His voice cracked slightly. "I learned that sometimes the richest man in the room is the poorest in spirit." The video went viral again, but this time, people saw something different. Not scandal, but growth. Alicia's grace and Charles's humility touched millions. Letters poured in for both of them. Alicia's nursing fund received donations from strangers around the world. Months later, at the opening ceremony of a children's hospital Charles helped fund in Alicia's honor, she stood beside him, no longer the quiet waitress in the background, but a symbol of compassion. She smiled at Evan, who hugged her tightly and whispered, "Thank you again." As cameras flashed, Charles turned to the crowd and said, "That night, I learned that greatness isn't about money, it's about character. Dignity doesn't come from power, it comes from kindness." When the applause rose, Alicia's eyes filled with tears, not for recognition, but for something deeper. Redemption. That night, as the lights dimmed and the city skyline glowed, Charles looked out from his balcony, holding his son's hand. "You know, Evan," he said softly, "heroes don't always wear suits. Sometimes, they wear aprons." And somewhere across town, Alicia sat by her window, studying late into the night, her heart light. Not because the world finally saw her, but because she never stopped seeing the world with compassion. The story became a quiet legend, shared online, whispered in homes, taught in classrooms. Not just about a millionaire and a waitress, but about what it truly means to see someone. Because sometimes, the smallest act of courage can reveal the biggest truth of all, that humanity, not wealth, is what makes us rich.